Hello everybody, Ellery here, and I have another Advance Wars by Web replay that I'd like to share with you today. Lately, I've been going through the recently completed games on the Live League and trying to see if I could find anything interesting. And I think I found something that was pretty interesting, so I wanted to share this game. To me, this was a good demonstration of how good fundamental play can benefit you, especially in the Live League. If you have good fundamentals, you can win games, and you can win games quickly. It got me really thinking about how this also applies to standard play. Just because a lot of times the winner of a match is going to be decided like very early on, but you just might not realize it. Now this match in particular actually ended up being pretty close, and that was another reason why I wanted to share it. So the people playing today are Stickman320. He picked Nell, and he's actually barely ever played Nell before. While Chociloni is playing Hawk, and Hawk is actually his most picked tier 1 CO. So there is going to be a little bit of an experience gap here. With this being a live match, I'm not going to be too critical of the players, but I do want to praise them for any good plays that I notice. Now their ratings are extremely close. Stickman is 1029 and Chociloni is 1061. So I'm not sure if this just happened randomly or if the Live League is a little bit better at helping you find opponents who are closer to your own skill level, but I thought it was pretty cool that their ratings were almost pretty even. That being said, there is another experience gap. So Stickman has only played 36 official matches and 168 total, while Chociloni has played 81 official matches and over 300 total matches. So once again, it seems like Chociloni has played a lot more Advance Wars, and he's also played with Hawk extensively, while Stickman has not played as many total games, and he has not played with Nell very much. First thing I want to talk about is the map itself. This is Pale Blue Dots. It's a tier 1 standard map, but it's actually a B rank map. Lately, I've really become a fan of these B rank maps. I think I just got tired of playing the S rank maps every time, and then I just started playing the A rank maps every time, and then now it's like, well, you know, these B rank maps, they're not really terrible, they're just not exceptional either. But on a very straightforward map like this, I think it's pretty cool to see like two players who have very similar levels of skill going up against each other, with no gimmicks or kind of difficult map mechanics to figure out in the way. This is also a pretty standard 2 bases versus 1 base in an airport kind of dynamic. There's a port here, but you can't really do anything with it. This port, you could technically build a battleship, I guess, if you wanted to. I guess I will spoil, nobody builds a battleship. And then the comm towers are locked away here in the corners, so typically you're not going to see the comm towers changing hands, although you can go for maybe a little bit of a funny play if you would like to do that. Next, I want to quickly talk about the COs. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because anybody who's watching the Advance Wars by Web replay commentary video probably already knows who the COs are. So Nell, she gets between 0 and 19 luck instead of the normal 0 to 9 luck. You're not going to get much value out of this unless you're intentionally taking unfavorable trades, and even then you have to get lucky, so you're not really going to be counting on this power as like an increased firepower type thing. It's just like a little small something that she has. That being said, at 3 stars she gets Lucky Star, and at 6 stars she gets Lucky Lass. These drastically improve the amount of luck damage that she gets, and this is the point where you can start to take extremely unfavorable trades. Like you can have an infantry or a recon attack into a tank, even a medium tank, a battlecopter, and you can actually win if you just get a little bit lucky. And it's worth taking those gambles because, you know, an infantry is only worth 1,000. Hawk is a little bit more straightforward than Nell. When it comes to his day-to-day power, he just gets plus 10 attack. This is going to give him an advantage in the day-to-day, which is going to give him an advantage in the early game. And considering that these live matches tend to go pretty quickly, this might give him another slight edge. Now his power is a little bit more expensive to use. At 5 stars he gets Black Wave, and at 9 stars he gets Black Storm. These basically just give global damage to the enemy and global healing to his own units. It's pretty strong because global damage is strong, and then on top of that you get the healing, which gives you a little bit of extra value. So let's see who comes out on top in this match. Chociloni is going to be in the green, and Stickman is going to be in the blue with Nell. Stickman is going first. He'll start off by building infantry, nothing too surprising there. Chociloni is going to send his infantry over to capture the secondary base. He moves his black boat on turn 1. Stickman's not going to move his black boat until turn 2. It probably doesn't matter, honestly. So basically right now they're going for the closest properties that they can capture to start immediately getting early game income. There's nothing too surprising going on here. This is kind of how you're going to play, especially like in a live league. Like I said, the fundamentals are very important. You don't want to do any crazy or strange plays early on. So I'll go until the point where I see the first divergence in their play. which if I recall was pretty early. I think it's actually on day 4, which should be today. So Stickman is moving out his infantry, and then he decides to make the play of a day 4 early game recon. Now early game recons can be good in standard play, they're not only good in fog play, because they can harass enemy infantry. Although if you are going to build this, I think you need to have a plan of exactly like which property you're going to send this recon to. Like when you build this recon, you have to know where it's going to go and what it's going to do. If you don't know that, then you should probably just keep building infantry. That's my opinion. And we're going to see on day 4, Chociloni is not going to build a recon. I believe he just keeps building infantry, but I'll double check on that. Oh, he builds a tank. So Stickman opens up with a recon on his strong side, which forces Chociloni to respond with a tank on his weak side. When you're the first player, you can kind of dictate what the vehicle builds are going to be. So that was one advantage that Stickman played, because a recon is cheaper than a tank, but this means that Chociloni is stuck with a tank on his weak side, so this is going to set him back slightly, but at the same time, the counterpoint to this is that the tank just hard counters the recon, so it's going to stop the recon from being able to do very much harassment. Although of course Chociloni probably would have been happier if he could have built a tank on his strong side. Next up, we have some more infantry movement, and now Stickman's second build is going to be an artillery on his strong side. So he's got a recon and an artillery on his strong side. We'll see how this plays out. So the artillery doesn't really counter a tank, which is something to keep in mind. So far Chociloni has built a tank to counter a recon, but now Stickman is responding with an artillery that doesn't particularly counter the tank. So let's see what Chociloni does in response. Going to move his troops out. His black boat comes back, and he's just going to build some infantry and be a little bit patient, because artillery is a very slow play, which means that Chociloni has plenty of time to respond to the artillery. Stickman is going to continue capturing. Now there is a slight difference in their capture game that's going to come up in a few days. I want to note that. I'm making a mental note for myself right now, so I don't forget to mention it. We come back to Chociloni's turn. Chociloni is going to get his captures for this turn, then he's going to start moving his infantry forward. He's moving his forward infantry before his back infantry, or he actually seems to kind of just be moving them at random. I was advised by Advanced Warrior several times now to move my back infantry before I move my forward infantry, so it's something I'm starting to notice a little bit more. Chociloni is not hesitating at all. He's being very aggressive with the tank. He moves it very far forward. Very straight, a little bit weird because it actually doesn't, it doesn't cover these infantry down here, although I'm not sure that the recon can actually reach them yet either. Let's check on that. So the recon can reach this infantry, and the tank is not protecting this infantry anymore. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. I'm wondering if maybe he just wants to go forward and threaten this artillery as soon as possible. Chociloni ends up being very aggressive in this match. Now here's what I thought was really interesting. Chociloni opens up Battlecopter here on day 6. This is a very early Battlecopter, but it is worth noting that the Battlecopter is a direct counter to the artillery. So once again, Chociloni, he's not. It's pretty interesting. It's a little bit of a reactive play, but he's focusing on building units that specifically counter the units that Stickman is building, which can be pretty good. It can be a pretty good strategy. So we'll see how that works out for him as the game presses forward. Stickman is going to go on with his captures for this turn. He's moving his infantry forward very cautiously, but he's building a little bit of an infantry wall around it, especially with regards to these mountains. These mountains are going to help defend the artillery, and then if the tank tries to harass any of these infantry, it will get punished as a result. So there's really no safe attack that this tank can make, so it probably would have been a good move to have it back here, protecting against this recon. The next thing is Stickman's builds for this turn. It's going to be an anti-air, a mech, and an infantry. So because Chociloni built the very early Battlecopter, this forced Stickman to build an anti-air in response, and he didn't have enough money left over to build a tank, so he was forced to build a mech. So the mech is a slow defensive unit. Here's what we're going to start noticing happening as a result. So we had recon, which was answered by tank, which was answered by artillery, which was answered by copter, which was answered by anti-air. So now we're stuck with this situation where Stickman doesn't have enough money to build a tank, and Stickman doesn't have any tanks, whereas Chociloni is the only person with tanks on the field, and next turn he's going to have plenty of funds to build more tanks if he wants to. So by opening up with that early game recon, which by the way hasn't done anything yet, Stickman really put himself behind in the early game. This recon has basically just been moving back and forth along this left lane. It has not generated any value. The only thing it accomplished was setting back his own build order so that he wasn't able to build any tanks, and this is going to put him behind in the tank versus tank game. So Chociloni is being a little bit patient with his tank. He's not moving it all the way back, but he is just waiting for his chance to strike. Meanwhile, for his build order, of course, he's going to start building another tank. He's going to put himself ahead in the tank game. Now it's 2 tanks versus 0 tanks. Stickman is going to move his artillery into this nice safe spot between these 2 mountains. This is going to protect it against the tank, and he puts an infantry on either side. It shouldn't be possible to break through this wall with anything, so this artillery should be completely safe. Even the copter cannot fly around behind it, and even if it wanted to, it would immediately get punished by this anti-air. So it's a nice little makeshift defensive formation. It's a little different from like a straight horizontal infantry wall that you normally see, but you're taking advantage of the terrain. So you're putting these mountains to good use. I think the reason why Stickman built the artillery was because he wanted to make use of these mountains. But I'm not sure if it was for any specific purpose behind that, because the artillery in this position, it doesn't really do anything other than lock down this one city right here. So maybe I guess the artillery was built to lock down this city right here. The problem is that in the time he's done that, Chociloni has already captured the respective city on the opposite end. So if Stickman had just gone for this capture, maybe he would already have this city, rather than just be denying it. I think, yeah, Stickman actually does not go for the interrupt here, so Chociloni is going to get this city as well. On top of that, if he moves his forward infantry, okay, hold on, he's not moving his forward infantry yet. So he's going to pick up a kill here. I would say he's going to pick up this kill for free, but it's not exactly free, because these units are kind of left out hanging. So even though they did get a technically favorable trade against, you know, to wipe out an infantry without taking any damage in turn, the truth is they're kind of out here in this position where they're not entirely 100% safe, especially this infantry here. So if you're just trading 1 infantry for 1 infantry, it's maybe not the strongest move. Now, another thing, what Chociloni does here is he actually goes for the attack here. He's being very aggressive. He's going to press the attack here. I wonder if maybe he should have just tried to capture this city, because I guess the battlecopter could have interrupted it. Maybe that's why he didn't bother trying to get the city. So he's moving his back units later in the turn. This turn he's going to build an anti-air in response to this copter, and he's going to build another tank. Now we've got 3 tanks versus 1 tank. So Stickman finally has a tank on the field. It's just now ready to move. It's not going to get back. It's not going to get out to the front lines right away. Stickman does capture his comm tower now, whereas Chociloni has not even started capturing his comm tower. However, because Hawk has an innate +10 attack, this kind of just balances them out. It doesn't really give Nell a particular advantage. So now Stickman is going to go for this capture, and he's using his artillery to help protect this capture, so that if Chociloni wants to interrupt the cap, it's going to be very difficult to do so. The other thing, it's actually a kind of a twofold. So not only is he building a wall to protect this artillery, but he's also somewhat trapping this tank. So now this tank doesn't really have anywhere to go. It's going to have to move through this lane here. But if he can block this lane, then the tank would be completely trapped. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be possible to block this lane. He is going to damage that infantry, but he won't be able to trap the tank completely. However, when the tank moves this way, it's either going to be within range of this tank or this battlecopter, so there's not really any safe position for this tank to go from now on. So Chociloni is going to have to think about what he wants to do with this tank, because it no longer has a safe position to go. So he's going to start by moving his infantry forward. He is going to go for that capture now. I guess the logic is that anything that gets sent over here to interrupt this capture is going to take away from Stickman's defense. So this tank's going to go here, it's going to take out this infantry, and then it's just going to sit on top of the forest. I guess this is a pretty decent defensive position. He's going to move our infantry in front of it to block it so that it can't be first striked by the tank. And then he's going to move his own infantry, and he's just going to start brawling in the center. He's actually not even going to attack the copter. He's just going to sit here and build a nice horizontal wall to protect his own battlecopter from getting the first strike, allowing Stickman to get the first strike. So at this point, he does not interrupt this capture, he just pulls back. That being said, he's already got the income advantage, and he's got the massive tank advantage. He just builds 2 more tanks. So he's already up 17 to 15. Stickman will get this property, but there's a good chance Chociloni might get this property as well. Stickman's also going to get this property though, so the income might balance itself out. We will see. But Chociloni has been a lot more aggressive on his strong side, whereas Stickman has actually been very slow and very defensive on his own strong side, because he started with this recon, which, by the way, still hasn't generated any value. And he took the time to slowly get this artillery into position, he took the time to slowly get this mech into position. There's not really any pressure over here on Chociloni's weak side, whereas Stickman's weak side is getting massively pressured, to the point where Chociloni is almost overextending, but he's holding the line fairly well. So I wouldn't say that he's playing badly. Stickman is moving over here. He's going to try to do the same thing to get this city over. Problem is that Chociloni has forces that can interrupt his capture that, aren't really going to do anything otherwise. Whereas if Stickman wants to interrupt this capture, it's going to require these forces to it's going to basically require this offense to just completely fall apart. And the match is still pretty even, but you can tell that Stickman is kind of a little bit behind right now, I would say, on both fronts. Like, this defense feels a little bit weaker, and then this offense also feels a little bit slower. There's a little bit of a replay glitch. I'm not sure where the recon went. I'm going to check on that at the start of the next turn. Stickman is desperately trying to build more tanks. He doesn't even bother trying to interrupt this capture. Okay, so it looks like the recon moved forward to protect the artillery. So the artillery is in this position. It's going to threaten this tank to move out of the way. It's also going to continue to protect these units here, and it actually even protects this tank here, so that's pretty good. I don't know about leaving this mech here on the Fort Mountain. You're kind of leaving him out to dry, although that depends on whether or not Chociloni can actually reach him. It looks like what Chociloni is doing, because his tank was kind of trapped in this position and forced to move through the center over to the right flank, it's probably a good idea to just take all of these tanks and just move them into the right flank now. And that's probably what he's going to do, if I had to guess. I rewatched the match, I watched the match for the first time yesterday, so I'm kind of rewatching it today. He gets a good first strike on this tank here, countering it basically with the copter. Copter weakens the tank without taking any counter damage, and then this allows his tank to hit the enemy tank for good damage. Now he's going for a capture on a very, very forward property on his strong side, and he's even pushing all the way up here to where Stickman's black boat is. His base is only a few tiles away, so he's close to threatening the enemy base already on day 10. This is what I meant about the live games going pretty quickly. And as I suspected, this tank here is going to go up on the right side. Now he is sending one tank over here. It's probably just to help guard this city. Interested to see where the other tanks are going to go. So this one's going to the right, and this one is kind of going in the middle. So this is a pretty flexible position. This allows him to go left or right, depending on how things play out the very next turn. This is a pretty good fundamental play. Basically, put your tank at the center. You don't have to commit it to the left or the right. You can just put it here in the middle, and then next turn you can go left or right as you need. Build order. He's going to get a copter, an artillery, and then an infantry. And this artillery feels a little bit slow. I think right now he has a very strong advantage in aggression. He probably should have just kept up the aggression with another tank. And it looks like he had the money for it too, so I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't. You can see Chociloni is starting to pull ahead. I think that advantage in the tank game is really paying off for him now, because he's now 8 units ahead, although his unit value isn't, it's not an insurmountable lead in terms of unit value, but he is getting 1,000 more income each turn, and he is threatening to take this property, which would give him even more of an income lead. This tank here ends up getting a pretty good first strike in this location because I think he left himself a little bit too close to the enemy base. So this is one of the reasons why you don't want to fight in range of the enemy base unless you're ready to push for the capture. And another thing is that, like, this copter here was able to get a first strike on this copter here. Suddenly this offense is kind of falling apart, probably because he did overextend a little bit. But it wasn't for nothing, because he is very likely going to get this city. I don't think there's anything left that can interrupt this capture. Actually, I see something that can interrupt it, so yep, that's probably what's going to happen. He's going to use the anti-air here to interrupt this capture. Interesting decision, because this anti-air is now probably going to get picked off by these tanks, but we'll see. maybe that won't happen. We are getting very close to Stickman getting the lucky lass, or sorry, we are getting very close to Stickman getting the lucky star. We'll see if he uses that soon or if he's going to save up for the lucky lass. When you're this far behind, it might be a good idea to save up for the lucky lass because you're probably going to be getting more stars, since you get more stars when you take damage than when you deal damage. So being a little bit further behind, you can afford to wait for your superpower. Funny enough, Chociloni just now finally gets his comm tower. He's not letting up on the attack either, he's pushing in. He picks off that anti-air, he's going to move his own infantry forward, he's now threatening this property here, he's threatening the port, he might be threatening the airport soon. He's got copters coming up from behind to help reinforce this left flank. He's wisely pulling back his infantry, so he's not just throwing away units for no good reason. He's getting a nice clean kill here, keeps his infantry at full health to either capture the city or protect the city as needed. His artillery is slowly moving into position. He's got this one tank over here guarding the left-hand side. That's all you need when it's an infantry versus infantry battle, but he decides to move another tank forward as well. Now he's building another anti-air. He knows that this anti-air is probably going to get taken out soon, so he's building another anti-air. That way this one can get into the fight quicker. That's another smart play on Chociloni's part. Now because of the heavy damage that Stickman has taken this turn, he's getting very close to that lucky lass. Let's see if he's able to pop it soon. So the first thing he does, he immediately attacks the anti-air with his own copter. He actually got a pretty good, I think he got a pretty good roll there even without the power. Dealing 4 damage to an anti-air, that feels a little bit exceptional to me. Maybe I'll check the caps later, and then yeah, he's going to do that so that he can pop Lady Luck right away. Now we've got a shot with an infantry versus a tank. That's not a bad luck roll, but it's definitely not like a lady. It's not worthy of a Lady Luck. We'll see the next shot, recon versus tank. Now that was a great roll. That recon basically just tore that tank apart. The mech is able to move forward. We've got an injured tank that comes in, not quite able to finish off the infantry. One shot on another infantry there. We've got a copter that one-shots a tank on a city. That's great. That's fantastic. We've got another infantry versus infantry one-shot. We've got a tank. It's going to take out an anti-air. I probably could have done that even without the power. This tank here is just going to pick off a weakened infantry. And this tank is going to pick off a weakened infantry. So I don't think he got the most impact that he could have out of that power. I wonder if it would have been a good idea to save it for one more turn. But then if you do that, you're going to allow Hawk to get his Black Storm. So it was a little bit of a tricky situation. I think Stickman had to make a very difficult decision right there. And I think he got some pretty good trades there. He got a few one-shots against infantry, he got a good one-shot against the tank on a city, and this recon was also able to get a very good roll against this tank. It would have been nice if a couple more of his infantry were closer to the front lines, so they could have taken, you know, these risky shots and maybe gotten some more value out of the lucky lass. But that wasn't a bad power, it just, you know, it wasn't the best that it could be. But I think that's a testament to Chociloni's play, because Chociloni really forced him into a position where he had no choice, he had to use his power right away. That did equalize the playing field a little bit. It put Chociloni down to 22 units, and it also put his unit value below Stickman's value. For the first time in a little while, it's been a few turns since we've seen that. So Chociloni is going to respond, making some very nice favorable trades. He got the one-shot, or sorry, he got the first strike here. The problem is, with that plus 10 defense and the luck damage, this tank was still able to hit back pretty hard, so that ended up being a 5-6 trade. And now he's going to use the Black Storm as soon as he gets his power ready. A lot of damage to Nell's units, and a little bit of healing to his own units, so this unfavorable trade suddenly becomes an 8-3, and then you've got wounded units all over the field. All these infantry are wounded, that's going to slow down the capture game. This mech is wounded, that's going to make it less effective. This anti-air and tank are going to have to pay repair costs next turn. This is one of the great things about global damage, is you force your enemy to pay repair costs. That's going to slow down his build order even more. That's going to put Stickman even further behind on the tank game. Once again, this is just a really great, like, fundamentally strong way to play a unit like Hawk. To play a commander like Hawk, I should say. He's doing all of the things that is forcing Stickman into a difficult position where he either can't make the best plays, or he's just innately at a disadvantage. That was kind of a funny shot. He went with the 3 HP copter and tried to attack the copter. I guess he brought it down to 5 health, so that's worth something. That'll make it a little bit less dangerous on the following turn. It does feel like Chociloni's offense here has finally started to crumble apart, so he's not pushing as hard on this flank. but he's kind of transitioning over here. He's got these battle copters, he's got this tank, he's got this artillery in position, and the only thing to counter it is this weakened infantry force. So he might be able to switch over to attacking on this flank in the next turn. So now we're basically transitioning into the mid game, where Chociloni is going to redistribute the offense from this side over to this side. Surprisingly, that copter was not able to hit that tank very hard. These tanks are going to come in, just help pick off these weakened infantry. That tank is gone, that infantry is gone, and yeah, Chociloni's infantry has completely fallen apart here. He's got, Chociloni's offense has completely fallen apart here. He's only got 1 infantry left. But Stickman sees what Chociloni is doing, and he's regrouping his own forces on this side over here. So we're going to take the fight to the left flank. Basically just going to reset everything. We've got 1 more tank coming out here. Now we've got 4 tanks versus 6 tanks. Suddenly Stickman is the one who's ahead of the tank war, but you have to keep in mind that a lot of these tanks are at least partially wounded because of the Black Storm. This one's down to 1 HP, so that's barely even a tank. You could barely even call that a tank. Alright, got Chociloni moving his fresh forces to the front line. He's able to finally get a shot with the battlecopter against the artillery. I mentioned earlier how the battlecopter is a hard counter to the artillery. Here's a good reason why. Now granted, this anti-air can come in and punish this battlecopter, but then the anti-air is going to get taken out by the tank, so it's basically just a game of back and forth. I thought this was a pretty funny play. Chociloni is coming up here, he's just basically threatening the comm tower. If Stickman doesn't do anything, he's not going to get the comm tower right away, but he will get the comm tower eventually, so it's a little bit cheeky. He's basically moving like a skeleton crew to just hold the line here, while the rest of his forces work on breaking through this wall. This mech, which was built a very long time ago, is just sitting here on 5 HP. It still hasn't generated much value. Gotta be very careful when you build something like that early game recon, that early game mech. Recon ended up not really doing anything. The mech hasn't really done anything yet. The only thing they did was set Stickman behind in the early game, which is a shame because I feel like, you know, the match is still very close. So if Stickman's early game had been a little bit stronger, maybe he would be the one who's slightly in the lead now instead of being the one who's a little bit behind. He's keeping up pretty decently on the unit count, but because of that Black Storm, his unit value is a lot lower. He's just got a lot of wounded units everywhere, whereas Chociloni has all these fresh units. The infantry survives on 2 HP, so he can technically still go up here and threaten this comm tower, which means he would be able to get it in about 5 turns. He's bringing these tanks back, he's setting units on the city to heal. Now he's going to restructure his defense around here, and he goes for the attack on this copter over here, and he decides to just leave the one on the mountain. The one hovering over the mountain, I should say. He's moving his own tanks into position. So I think the reason he went for this here is because this tank actually can't reach that square. Oh, no, it can. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5. Well, he can only reach it if he clears out this area. If he has to go around the mountain, there's no way he can reach this anti-air. So going for this copter here allowed him to kill off a copter without his anti-air getting punished. I think that was the reasoning behind that attack. He's building another mech. Now this, I don't know about that. Building a mech when you're already this far behind late in the game. I guess the idea is that if Stickman is going to make another push for this base, you have this defensive mech that can just sit on this mountain and help protect the base. And it's a pretty cheap investment, but it might have been a good idea to just either save up some money or try to get some more tanks or stronger units to the front line. We're slowly building up another attack force on the right hand side while we're chipping away at the offensive here. Chociloni has his plan and he is sticking to it. He manages to break through the wall slightly, but he only gets a shot with an infantry here. I guess the reason why he pulled back this copter is that he didn't want it to get taken out by the anti-air, but I almost feel like it would have been a good play to just get a first strike against this tank if he could find a way to maneuver into position, because, or at least maybe even just finish off the artillery, because these tanks are probably going to punish this thing anyway. And he's got another fresh tank that's getting ready to come up into position right here in the center. Whereas you can look, this is one thing actually I've started to do, is look at my opponent's build order when I'm making my decisions about what to do, which probably sounds like common sense to some of the more experienced players, but if you're a newer player, or if you're like me and you can just be pretty careless at times, it's good to stop and think about these things. But if you look at what's sitting on each player's base, Chociloni has a tank sitting here, but Stickman only has 2 infantry sitting here. So if you move this tank forward, you know that there's not really going to be any tanks coming for at least 2 more days. Because at the very least, Stickman would have to build a tank tomorrow, and then the next day after that, he'd have to move the tank forward, and then the day after that, the tank would finally be ready to strike. Whereas your tank, if you move it forward now into the center, it's going to get here into the fight sooner. So that should really inform your decision about what you're going to do with these forces in the center, because you know that you have the momentum for the next 2 days, rather than playing a little bit cautiously. It's a little more difficult to do that in Fog of War because you can't see your opponent's builds. So I guess this is something where I started to learn because I've been playing Standard more than Fog of War these days. I used to almost exclusively play Fog of War, but I'm learning a lot more from playing Standard, so I think it's valuable to play. And then even though he pulled the copter back, it still gets sniped by this anti-air anyway. Although this does force the anti-air way out of position, so it's going to be much easier to punish this anti-air. So I guess I can see the reasoning behind it. It was a little bit of a trap, but I wonder if it would have been better to get some value out of the copter before allowing the anti-air to shoot it down. Either that or he literally just miscount. Maybe because it was a live play, he just miscounted the tiles. He thought that he pulled the copter back, but it actually wasn't safe. It was one of those 2 things. And he is going to go for this here. Now he's never going to get this comm tower, but it is interesting because it forces Stickman to pull this copter away and take a shot here. So this is going to slow down the copter. It's going to be even longer before this copter gets to the front line to contribute to the combat. And he managed to generate that value with just a 2 HP infantry. So I think that was kind of worth it. It was a funny play. It was a little bit of a meme, but I think it was actually a good play as well. Now this turn, Stickman can't really afford to build anything other than a few infantry because he wants to get another copter out. He's focusing on his air force, which is a pretty good decision, I think. Now granted, Chociloni does have this anti-air in position, but one anti-air can only shoot down 1 copter. So if you just overwhelm him with the number of copters, there's not going to be anything that he can really do. Especially if you get if you can use the mech to protect your copters. Like you could have a situation where the mech is right behind the copter. If the anti-air shoots it, then you're going to shoot down the anti-air with the mech. See if he's able to set up any nice traps like that. The match is still pretty close at this point. Stickman is probably going to end up slightly behind in unit count and unit value at the end of this turn, but he's definitely still not out of the fight yet, especially because he's got another Lucky Last coming up soon. That being said, Chociloni is moving into position. He's threatening the base again. This wall over here that Chociloni has been picking at is pretty much fallen apart at this point. We've got another anti-air coming up, so Chociloni sees that Stickman is focusing on copters, so he's going to build additional anti-air so that he prevents himself from getting overwhelmed, which is the exact situation that I mentioned. Now Stickman is going to use a Lucky Star. Let's see if he gets any good luck rolls this time. So the first shot, pretty decent shot against a artillery. He fails to get the 1 shot against the infantry, even with a mech. That was probably a little bit unlucky. Another fail. That was really bad. That was like a double fail almost. That was a really solid hit with that tank. That was a really good hit with that tank there. Okay hit with that infantry. That was actually pretty okay. You're typically not going to do 3 damage to a copter with an infantry, so I mean that was better than nothing. And then he definitely managed to weaken that artillery with that infantry, so that was a pretty good shot as well. That copter versus that tank, I would say that was pretty mediocre. I don't know if he even got any bonus luck damage on that. But it did allow the tank to come in and finish the Chociloni's tank. So it was okay. Stickman is doing everything that he can to hold his forces together, but he is definitely starting to fall further and further behind. A couple of days ago I would have said that it was still a close fight, but with another Black Storm coming soon, I would say that Stickman is kind of on the back feet right now. He is definitely fighting to stay in this game. He's not fighting to win anymore. He's kind of fighting to stay in this game, and then maybe he can win if he manages to grind it out for long enough. So Chociloni is going to come in. He is pressing this offense on the right-hand side. Now he's going to attack on the left-hand side. I wonder if it might have been a good idea to get a copter strike against this tank. But I guess the logic is that if you weaken this copter enough, now this copter is completely unchecked. Now this copter, which is coming in soon, is going to be completely unchecked. So going for the copter first was probably the right play. Another case where these infantry are just hanging on with 1 HP, which is probably a little bit annoying for both players. Though sometimes, sometimes you can't really do much with these 1 HP infantry, but other times, I mean, they can be really effective because it's just a unit that's in the way. It forces the opponent to do something to block it. Now this mech is getting punished by getting attacked with an infantry. Ugh. So yeah, that mech barely did anything. It just slowly crept over here, attacked an infantry, but then got attacked by an infantry. So I think that mech ended up losing value. Gotta be careful with those mechs. You don't want to build those mechs this late in the game. And surprisingly to me, Stickman just went ahead and resigned right here. I wonder if maybe if there's anything he could have done differently to keep himself in the game a little bit longer. I do think, like I said, at this point he was kind of just fighting to stay in the game, but I don't know if I would say that he had completely lost. I think if he wanted to keep fighting, he could have kept fighting for a little while longer. But if you look at the positioning of the map at this point, Chociloni has pulled ahead on the income 20,000 to 16,000. He's been ahead for a while. He's ahead on the unit count. He's ahead on the unit value. He's got better positioning. He's so deep on this right flank. Like he's basically rolling over Stickman's weak side, whereas his weak side is almost pushing back aggressively against Stickman's strong side. So basically, I think both players actually showed some pretty decent fundamental play at different points throughout the game, but I think the build order early on really had some long-term consequences, where Stickman opened up with that recon that didn't generate any value. Chociloni was able to counter it just by building a tank, and then even though he was stuck with this tank on his weak side, he was able to transition it through the middle over to his strong side, and then make a push on the strong side early in the game. So that early recon didn't really do much, whereas this early tank actually generated a ton of value and ended up, being fundamental to winning the game. It also put Chociloni ahead. He had more tanks through most of the early game, which helped him apply that pressure. And then Stickman opened up with an artillery after the recon, which was easily countered by Battlecopter. The Battlecopter forced Stickman to build an anti-air, and this made it so Stickman wasn't able to build any tanks because he didn't have the funds, and this put him even further behind on the tank game. Even though both players made pretty good plays on a micro level throughout the game, I would say it was kind of the macro that decided the outcome of this game, because that early game build order really just set Stickman so far behind that it was very difficult for him to come back and secure a victory. So this is kind of what I meant before when I said that the winner of a match is often decided very early on, but you might not realize it until you get past like day 10. I think by day 17, I guess Stickman kind of realized, I've probably lost this match. And especially with a live game, you might be thinking, well, I've already been playing for 30 minutes, I've already been playing for 40 minutes. I don't want to sit here and play for another hour just to try and grind out a win and then still end up losing anyway in a lot of those cases. So that can inform your decisions on when to resign and when to not resign. But I think it was still a pretty interesting match, at least for me. I might continue to look through these completed games in the live league. I think there's some gems you can find here. These B rank maps, these 1000 level or 1100 level players, the ones that most people aren't ever really going to take a second look at. For me, there's still some interesting things that you can find in there, so I might continue to do that in the future. If you're interested in Advanced Wars by Web or other strategy games, consider subscribing to the channel. I also play a lot of Fire Emblem, and I make videos about Fire Emblem from time to time. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day.